You know, after 32 years of delivering babies and holding the hands of mothers through every possible complication, I have learned something that no medical textbook ever taught me. Pregnancy is not just about growing a baby inside your body. It is about carrying a hope so fragile that even breathing too hard feels like it might break everything. And the heaviest silence I have ever witnessed is not the silence of a stillborn delivery room. It is the silence of a mother who is too afraid to say out loud what her heart already knows might happen. There was a woman who came to me on a rainy Tuesday morning. Her name was Jessica. She was 28 weeks pregnant, and on paper, everything looked absolutely fine. Her blood pressure was normal. Her sugar levels were stable. The baby's growth scans were right on track. But when she sat down in my consultation room, her eyes told a completely different story. She was not glowing. She was not excited. She was terrified in a way that made my heart ache just by looking at her. She sat on the edge of the chair, both hands resting on her belly like she was protecting something that could be snatched away any second. I asked her how she was feeling, the way I ask every patient. And she looked at me with eyes that had seen too much darkness already. She said, "Doctor, I am not asking if my baby will survive. I am asking if I will survive losing another one." That sentence stayed with me. It stayed because I have heard similar words before, from women who have walked through the fire of pregnancy loss and come out the other side completely changed. But there was something different about Jessica. Something heavier. She was not just scared. She was convinced that tragedy was the only ending waiting for her. And as she began to tell me her story, I understood why. Jessica opened her bag and pulled out a small diary. Not the kind you write grocery lists in. This one was worn at the edges, pages yellowing, clearly opened and closed 1,000 times. She placed it on my table and said, "I have been trying to have a baby for 7 years, doctor." 7 years of hope followed by silence. Then she told me about her first pregnancy. It had been unexpected but so welcome. She reached 24 weeks before her water broke in the middle of the night. By the time she reached the hospital, the infection had already spread. They could not save the baby. A boy. She had already chosen his name. The second pregnancy came after 2 years of trying. She was careful. She rested more, ate better, stopped working, did everything the internet told her to do. But at 22 weeks, her body started contractions that would not stop. The doctors tried everything. Bed rest, medication, even a cervical stitch. Nothing worked. She delivered another baby, this time a girl, who lived for only 40 minutes. 40 minutes of holding a baby she knew she would have to let go. After that, Jessica stopped telling people she was pregnant. She stopped buying baby clothes. She stopped planning nurseries and imagining names. She told me that hope had become her enemy because every time she allowed herself to believe, life found a way to break her again. And yet, here she was 28 weeks into her third pregnancy, still showing up, still holding on. Even when holding on hurt more than letting go ever could. I remember looking at her and thinking about how we call these babies rainbows. Rainbows after the storm. But no one talks about how exhausting it is to keep searching for light when all you have known is darkness. Jessica was not just pregnant. She was fighting a war inside her own mind every single second. Jessica told me something that day that I have never forgotten. She said, "Doctor, I have not slept through a single night in this pregnancy. Not one." I asked her why, and she explained that she had developed a routine. Every hour, sometimes every half hour, she would press her palms against her belly and wait. Wait for that small flutter, that tiny kick, that little roll that told her the baby was still alive inside her. And when she felt it, she would breathe for a few minutes. Then the fear would creep back, and she would wait again. She showed me her phone. She had been tracking movements since 18 weeks. Every kick, every shift, every hiccup, noted down in a notebook and also in an app. She said if 3 hours passed without feeling anything, she would drink cold water and lie on her left side. If nothing happened after that, she would rush to the nearest clinic, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes while her husband was at work, and she had to call a cab alone. The clinic staff knew her by name. They had stopped asking questions. I see this so often in women who have experienced late pregnancy loss. The baby's movement becomes everything. It becomes proof of life, proof of hope, proof that maybe this time the story will end differently. But here is what breaks my heart. Instead of bringing joy, every kick becomes a promise that might still be broken. Instead of feeling excited, these mothers feel temporary relief. And that relief never lasts long enough. Jessica told me that sometimes she would lie in bed and beg her baby to move. Not kick hard, just move. Just a small sign. And when the baby finally did, she would cry. Not happy tears. Tears of exhaustion from constantly bracing herself for the worst. She was not living her pregnancy. She was surviving it, one movement at a time. And deep down, both of us knew that this was not sustainable. Something had to give. It happened at 31 weeks and 3 days. Jessica later told me that she remembered the exact date, because it was her mother's birthday. She had woken up that morning feeling different. Not sick, not in pain, just different. Empty in a way she could not explain. She placed both hands on her belly and waited. Nothing. She told herself not to panic. The baby was probably sleeping. Babies have sleep cycles, even inside the womb. She knew this because I had told her this myself during one of our appointments. So she got up, made herself a glass of cold water, and lay down on her left side. This was her routine. Cold water, left side, 20 minutes of waiting. She closed her eyes and pressed her palms against her belly. Nothing. She waited another 20 minutes. Still nothing. She ate a small piece of chocolate, because sugar sometimes wakes babies up. She waited. Nothing. By now, her hands were shaking. She tried not to think about the last 2 pregnancies. She tried not to remember how the silence had felt before everything fell apart. But the memories came anyway, flooding in like water through a broken dam. She called her husband, but he was in a meeting and did not pick up. She called her mother, who lived 3 hours away. Her mother said, "Beta, don't overthink. Go to the hospital. Just go. I am leaving right now." Jessica grabbed her bag and called a cab. The drive to my hospital usually took 20 minutes. That day it took 40 because of traffic. She told me later that she spent those 40 minutes bargaining with God. Please let there be a heartbeat. Please let me feel one movement. Please do not make me go through this again. I will do anything. Anything. When she walked into my clinic, her face was pale. Not the pale of fear. The pale of someone who already knows the answer but needs to hear it from someone else. She did not say hello. She did not sit down. She just looked at me and said, "Doctor, the baby hasn't moved since yesterday afternoon. Please check." I took Jessica to the ultrasound room immediately. There was no waiting, no paperwork, no questions. When a mother at 31 weeks tells you she has not felt movement for nearly 24 hours, you do not make her wait. You just move. I remember her lying down on the examination bed, her hands still resting on her belly, her lips moving silently. She was praying. I see this often. Mothers praying even before I turn the machine on, as if their prayer alone could will a heartbeat into existence. I squeezed the gel onto her belly and placed the probe down. The screen flickered to life, black and white and gray shapes that most people cannot read. But I have been reading these images for 32 years. I know what a healthy heart looks like. I know what a struggling heart looks like. And I know what no heartbeat looks like. I moved the probe slowly across her belly, searching for that familiar flutter, that rhythmic dance of chambers that tells you life is still there. I searched the upper chambers. Nothing. I searched the lower chambers. Nothing. I adjusted the angle, pressed a little deeper, moved to a different position. Still nothing. The silence in that room was not empty. It was heavy, crushing, the kind of silence that sits on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Jessica was watching my face. She was not looking at the screen because she knew she would not understand what she was seeing anyway. She was watching my eyes, my expression, the small movements of my eyebrows that I could not control. And she saw it. The moment my face changed. The moment I knew. But I have not. Every single time, something breaks inside me too. I looked at Jessica and I knew she had already figured it out. She was not asking with hope anymore. She was asking because she needed to hear the words to make it real. I took a deep breath and I said, "I am so sorry, Jessica. The heartbeat is gone." I have noticed something over the years. When you tell a mother that her baby has died, every woman reacts differently. Some scream, some collapse, some go completely blank, like their mind has left their body to protect them from the pain. Some beg you to check again, to try a different machine, to call another doctor. But Jessica did none of those things. She just closed her eyes. And then she went completely silent. Not the silence of calm. The silence of someone who has been expecting this ending for so long that shock does not even have a chance to arrive. She had already imagined this moment 100 times. And now it was real. She lay there on the ultrasound bed with gel still drying on her belly, and she did not move. I placed my hand on her shoulder, and I said her name. She opened her eyes and looked at me. There were no tears. Just emptiness. She said, "I knew it. I knew this would happen. From the very first day of this pregnancy, I knew I would never bring a baby home." Her voice was flat, tired, like someone who had run a marathon only to find out the finish line had been moved further away. I wanted to tell her something hopeful, but I had no hope to give. Not in that moment. I explained what would happen next. She would need to be admitted. We would induce labor, and she would deliver the baby. There was no way to avoid that. Her body would not continue the pregnancy without a heartbeat. She would have to go through labor, through delivery, through holding a baby who would never cry. She listened to every word without interrupting. And when I finished, she asked me one question. She said, "Can I be alone for some time?" I nodded and stepped outside. But I did not go far. I stood outside the door and I listened. And then I heard it. The softest, most broken sound. She was not crying loudly. She was crying the way people cry when they have no tears left. And I leaned against the wall and cried with her. I admitted Jessica to the labor ward that evening. Her husband arrived an hour later, looking lost and broken, not knowing what to say or do. He kept touching her hand and then pulling away, as if he was afraid even his touch might cause more pain. Her mother reached the hospital by nightfall, and the three of them sat in that small room, surrounded by machines and monitors that no longer had a heartbeat to track. I gave them privacy for a while, but I kept checking in. Not because there was anything medical to do yet, because sometimes the only thing a doctor can offer is presence. The induction medication was administered slowly. It would take time, maybe 12 hours, maybe more, for Jessica's body to begin labor. She knew what was coming. She had been through this before twice. She knew the contractions would start small, then grow stronger, then become unbearable. She knew she would have to push out a baby she would never hear cry. She knew she would have to hold that baby, say goodbye, and then leave the hospital with empty arms. And still, she did not refuse. She did not fight. She just lay there, one hand on her belly, whispering something I could not hear. At some point late that night, I went to sit with her. Her mother had stepped out to make phone calls. Her husband had fallen asleep on the small couch, exhausted from crying. Jessica was awake, staring at the ceiling. I pulled a chair next to her bed and I sat down. She turned her head and looked at me. And then she said something I will never forget. She said, "Doctor, I have been praying for a miracle every single day for 7 years. Today I stopped, because I realized God is tired of hearing my voice." I did not know what to say to that, so I just held her hand, and we sat in silence, waiting for a labor that should have been a celebration, but was now a funeral. It was around 3 in the morning when the first contraction came. Jessica's body was responding to the medication exactly as expected. The monitor showed small, irregular waves, nothing too intense yet. The nurse on duty, a young woman named Priya who had worked with me for 6 years, was watching the screen closely. I had gone to my on-call room to rest for an hour, but I could never really sleep on nights like these. I was lying on the small cot, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Jessica's face, when my phone buzzed. It was Priya. She said, "Doctor, you need to come. There is something on the monitor. I cannot explain it." I was out of that bed and running down the corridor in less than 30 seconds. When I reached Jessica's room, Priya was standing by the fetal monitor, her finger pointing at a small blip on the screen. A blip that should not have been there. A blip that made no sense at all. A heartbeat. Not strong. Not steady. Not even consistent. But there. A faint, irregular flicker of electrical activity that looked like a heart trying to remember how to beat. I stared at that screen for what felt like a full minute. My mind was racing through every medical possibility. Could the earlier ultrasound have been wrong? No. I had searched thoroughly. Could the machine have malfunctioned? Unlikely. Could this be my own heartbeat interfering with the monitor? No, I was standing 3 feet away. I looked at Jessica. She was awake now, watching my face, searching for answers I did not have. I said, "I need to do another ultrasound. Right now." I did not wait for her response. I pulled the portable machine closer, squeezed gel onto her belly, and placed the probe down. And there it was. On the screen. A flicker. Small, fragile, irregular. But moving. Beating. Fighting. The heart had stopped. And then somehow, impossibly, it had started again. I looked at Jessica and I said words I never thought I would say in my entire medical career. "Jessica, I see a heartbeat. It is very weak. But it is there." Her hand flew to her mouth, and she made a sound I cannot describe. Not a cry. Not a laugh. Something in between. Something that sounded like a soul coming back to life. The next hour was the most difficult of my career. That heartbeat was there, but it was not stable. It would beat a few times, then pause just long enough to stop my own heart, then start again. I called my senior colleagues. I called the NICU team. I called the anesthesiologist. Everyone gathered in that small room, looking at the same screen, seeing the same impossible thing. No one could explain it. Medically, it made no sense. A heart that had stopped beating for nearly 24 hours does not just restart. The heartbeat was weak, and we did not know if there was brain damage from the time the heart had stopped. I told them everything, every hard truth, every possibility. And then Jessica looked at me and said something that silenced the entire room. She said, "Doctor, I have buried 2 babies. If this one dies on the operating table, at least I will know that I fought until the very last second. Please, do the surgery." Her voice did not break. Her hands did not shake. She had spent 7 years preparing for worst-case scenarios. She was not afraid anymore. She was ready. And somehow, that made me more afraid than anything else. We wheeled her into the operating room. The NICU team stood ready with a warmer, a breathing tube, medications. The anesthesiologist checked her vitals. I scrubbed in, my hands moving automatically, but my mind was racing. What if the heartbeat stopped again during surgery? What if the baby came out and never took a breath? What if I had to look at Jessica's face after all of this and tell her that the miracle had been just an illusion? I pushed those thoughts away. I could not afford them. Not now. Before the anesthesia took effect, Jessica reached out and grabbed my hand. She said, "Doctor, you told me once that you believe in miracles. Do you still believe?" I squeezed her hand and I said, "Today, Jessica. I believe today." I made the first incision. My hands were steady, but my heart was not. Every second felt like an hour. The operating room was completely silent except for the beeping of monitors and the quiet instructions I gave to my team. I worked quickly but carefully. The baby needed to come out as fast as possible, but I could not risk hurting Jessica. She had been through too much already. When I reached the uterus, I could feel the baby moving. Just a little. Not the strong kicks of a healthy baby, but small, weak movements that told me life was still there. Barely. I made the uterine incision and reached inside. The baby was small, much smaller than I had hoped. Pale. Limp. Not the pink color you want to see. I lifted the baby out and placed her on the warm sterile towel the nurse had ready. And for one terrible second, nothing happened. No cry. No movement. Just silence. The NICU team rushed forward. The lead neonatologist, a woman named Dr. Sharma who had seen everything, started stimulation, rubbing the baby's back, suctioning the mouth and nose. The seconds stretched into an eternity. And then, a sound. Small, weak, but unmistakable. A cry. Not loud like most babies. Not the angry, demanding cry of a healthy newborn. This was a different cry. A soft, broken, fighting cry. The kind of cry that says, I am here. I am still here. Do not give up on me. Dr. Sharma looked at me and nodded. Just once. But that nod said everything. The baby was breathing. On her own. Not well, not easily, but breathing. I looked over at Jessica. She was still under anesthesia, unaware of what had just happened. But I knew that when she woke up, I would have news for her. News I had never dared to hope I could give. Her baby girl was alive. Small, fragile, fighting, but alive. The NICU team wrapped the baby and carried her to the warmer. And as they worked, I stood there for a moment, my gloves covered in blood, my eyes burning with tears I had been holding back for hours. Somewhere in that room, someone started crying. I think it was me. Jessica woke up 2 hours later in the recovery room. The first word she said was not a name. It was a question. Is she alive? I was sitting beside her bed, waiting for those exact words. I took her hand and I said, she is alive, Jessica. She is small. She is in the NICU. She is on oxygen. But her heart is beating. Steady now. Stronger than before. And then Jessica cried. Not the silent, broken crying I had heard outside the ultrasound room. This was different. This was 7 years of pain leaving her body in waves of sound. Her husband held her. Her mother held her. And I stepped back and let them have that moment. The baby girl spent 47 days in the NICU. There were good days and bad days. Days when her oxygen levels dropped and days when she gained weight and days when the doctors worried about her brain development. But slowly, day by day, she grew stronger. The brain scans came back normal. The heart monitors showed a healthy, steady rhythm. And on the 48th day, Jessica walked out of that hospital carrying her daughter in her arms. A baby she had been told had no heartbeat. A baby who had stopped breathing inside the womb and then, against every medical odd, had started again. They named her Anya. It means grace in our language. Jessica told me later that she chose that name not because the pregnancy had been graceful, but because God had shown her grace when she had stopped believing grace existed. I still think about that family often. About the diary Jessica carried, worn at the edges. About the 7 years of hope followed by silence. About the heartbeat that disappeared and then, impossibly, returned. Moments like these remind me why I never stopped showing up to work, even on the hardest days. Medicine gives us knowledge, machines, and data, but it does not give us explanations for everything. Sometimes a mother's love refuses to follow the rules. Sometimes a tiny heart decides to keep fighting even when science says it cannot. I have learned that hope is not about ignoring reality. Hope is about holding space for possibility, even when possibility seems impossible. And that little girl, Anya, taught me something I will carry forever. A heartbeat can return. And so can hope.